Okay, continuing where we left off in the halacha of kosher, which is tying. So the bottom line is like this. Any double knot is for a tight double knot. A tight double knot is forbidden no matter how long it stays. It's rabbinically forbidden, maybe biblically forbidden. If it's a single knot, if you have, let's say, one piece of string and you just tie a knot in the string itself, not two strings together. You take a rope or a string and you tie a knot into it, that's also forbidden. If it's a bow and even a knot and a bow, like you tie your shoes, if it's going to be in for more than 24 hours, according to many opinions, you're also not allowed to do it. Because it's a question, what's the permanent knot? And even if it's a permanent knot, even though it's not a professional knot, it might still be forbidden. Any knot that people sometimes leave in place for an extended period of time. Because we're talking anytime you tie something and it's going to be there for an extended period of time, so then it's a permanent knot and you're not allowed to tie that on Shabbos. Okay, let's discuss now knots that you are allowed to tie on Shabbos. Which knots are you allowed to tie on Shabbos? So basically, a single knot that you have two strings together, like for instance tying shoelaces, that are not going to be in there for 24 hours. You're going to take it out within 24 hours. So then the din is, that's allowed lachatchila. It's more to do it, you can tie your shoes. We also learned, unless if you're planning to leave the shoes in there, to tie in there for an extended period of time. If you're planning to leave it an extended period of time, then you wouldn't be allowed to do it.
But not even to double.
Yeah, just a single knot with a bow. That would be allowed only if you're going to be taking it out within 24 hours. The same thing we learned about a tie. If you make a tie and you're planning to leave the knot in the tie for an extended period of time, then you can't make that tie on Shabbos. So the only thing you could do is if you have to make a tie on Shabbos, after Shabbos you should make sure to undo the tie.
What about if you tied before and like double tied before Shabbos?
No, if you double tied it before Shabbos, then you could, if you'd like to tie your shoelace, a double knot. Yeah. And your mind is it should be there for an extended period of time. So then it's done before Shabbos. The only problem is if the shoelace opens up, so then you can't retie it with a double knot. Because then it's more permanent. Or any bow, for instance, sometimes you can make a bow without actually tying a knot. How do you normally tie shoes? You make a knot, single knot, and then you make a bow over it. So that has to be out within 24 hours. But what happens if you just don't make the bottom knot, just take two bows and tie them together. So again, that's not at all considered a knot as far as halacha goes, and that could be even if it's going to be there for an extended period of time. If somebody makes a slip knot, you know what slip knot is, that you just pull it and it comes apart, that's also not considered a knot. And therefore you say they're right, even if it's going to be there permanently, but it's just not considered a knot because it's a knot that you can just remove and undo very easily. Single knot with the bow, we learned. Single knot with ends tucked in. Now what happens if somebody makes a knot, one knot, and then they take, instead of making a bow over the knot, they tuck in the ends of the shoelaces into the shoe itself. Then it's also not considered, it's considered a knot, but you're allowed to do that on Shabbos because again, you're going to take it out within 24 Shabbos, or before Shabbos is over. Now sometimes you have also, let's say you have a coat that has a belt. And a lot of times people, it's not the belt that you close it up, you just tie it, right? So sometimes people make a double knot on the coat, but it's a loose double knot. It's not a tight double knot. You know, you tie your coat, and then you make a knot, and then you put another, but it's not tightly closed together. So that knot is also allowed to be made on Shabbos. And B'chal, we're going to learn now the din of untying. Whatever you're allowed to tie, you can untie. Whatever you're not allowed to untie, you're not allowed to tie. Because they're interconnected, these two malachas. But you have to be careful. I'll give you an example. When you check your tzitzis on Shabbos, okay, a lot of times the top knot, each one of the knots of the tzitzis, not tzitzis, but every knot of the tzitzis is a double knot. Sometimes, if you notice, the knot on top of your tzitzis is the top knot is loose. Okay? So what you do during the week, you go like this, and you tighten the knot. Shabbos, you have to be careful not to tighten the knot, because it's a double knot. And your intent is not that it should be taken out within 24 hours. Your intent is it should last as long as it lasts. So you have to be careful on Shabbos when you're checking your tzitzis, and you see that this top knot is loose. All you're allowed to do is you can bring it down, but you can't tighten it on the first knot that's there. Because then your mamish making a knot, permanent knot. What?
For a kid, can you do a double knot tight so the only way he can take off his shoes at night is...
So we'll learn about that. It's a loose double knot, but then you have another issue. What happens, this happens a lot of times with kids' laces. They tie it normal, and then they end up in a double knot. And now the kid has to take off his shoes, and it's tight, so he's not able to take off his shoes. So are you allowed to undo a double knot that was not made intentionally? It wasn't made intentionally. You didn't want to make a double knot. You made like a bow, and then it knotted. So then the din is that you're allowed to untie that knot, because it was never, when you made, that knot was made, it was never intended to become a double knot. So even though it became a double knot, it's not a double knot that you made. And therefore you would be allowed to do it. But you have to be careful. Sometimes you have packages that you have on Shabbos, right? I'm not talking what you get delivered on Shabbos. It's a whole different shaila. But let's say you have a package in your house and it's tied with a string. Okay? So sometimes the question is, can you undo the knot? Let's say it's a bow. Okay, let's say somebody sent you a package years ago. Those of you guys that remember in the olden days, bakeries, they didn't put tape like they do now. When they had a cake and a box of cookies, they would wrap the very thin string on it, make a bunch of knots. Sometimes they made a bow at the end. So over there, you have to be careful on Shabbos. If, let's say, whatever it is, you have a package in your house that's tied with string or rope, and it's even though it's a regular knot in a bow. But when they tied it in the bakery, or the package wherever you got it from, that was made to last an extended period of time. Right. Let's say somebody gives you a gift on Shabbos, yeah? And it's in a box, and then they wrapped it with a ribbon. Right? And the ribbon is what's a ribbon? The ribbon is basically a knot, like you tie your shoes. It's a knot with a bow on top. Yeah. So now you're coming to you're getting it on Shabbos. Now the person, when they tied that knot, it could be their intention was for as long as it lasts, until the guy gets it. It could be a week, it could be 10 weeks, it could be whatever it is. So their mind was to make it a permanent knot. So now you're getting this ribbon, box with a ribbon on it, and you're untying the permanent knot, even though it's like a shoelace. But it was made for more than 24 hours. So you wouldn't be allowed to undo the ribbon on Shabbos. What you would have to do is cut the ribbon in a destructive way.
Cut the rope, like on the side.
That's what I'm saying, cut the string or the rope.
Rabbi, even though it's food you want to eat Shabbat, you cannot open?
You cannot open, because there's a kosher way of doing it. All you have to do is you're allowed to even take a scissors on Shabbos and cut the rope, or a knife. Either one you can use. But undo the knot, that you're not ruining the string. So what you're basically doing is untying a knot that was knotted in a permanent way. And any knot that was a permanent knot, just like you're not allowed to make the knot, you're not allowed to untie the knot.
You can tear it up.
You can tear it open.
With the scissors, don't you need to designate the scissors as like a Shabbat scissor?
No.
Scissor?
No.
But Shabbat, you're not allowed to use scissors.
No. A scissors is what's called in halacha keli shemalachta le'isr. It's a vessel whose primary use is for something forbidden, because normally tearing on Shabbos is not allowed. What is a scissors made for? A scissors is made to cut. Like a pen, okay, is a keli shemalachta le'isr. It's a vessel whose primary use is for something forbidden. Now, therefore, a pen, a scissors, they're all in the same category, is called an halacha keli shemalachta le'isr. But not all muktzah is completely forbidden to move. Certain things, like keli shemalachti le'isr, that's a classic example of it, you're allowed to move for two reasons. If you need the place where it's on, let's say somebody left a pen on the dining room table. Before Shabbos, they left the pen on the dining room table, and now Shabbos is coming, I have to set the table. And the pen is in the way. So even though the pen is muktzah, I'm allowed to pick it up and move it somewhere else because I need the place. Or, if I want to use this pen or scissors for something permissible. I'm using it for a permissible use. Let's say I want to keep a bookmark, okay? So I want to take the pen to keep the page where I'm up to. That's allowed. So then I would be allowed to move the pen for that. To give even a more crazier example, what happens if I want to open a coconut on Shabbos? I have a hard coconut. Now I want to open a coconut on Shabbos. Now to open a coconut, you can't just bang it with your hands, right? So what do you normally do? You take a hammer and a screwdriver, yeah? And right, that's how you open a coconut. And you zets it until it cracks open, yeah? On Shabbos, you would be allowed to do that. Even though a hammer is muktzah and a screwdriver is muktzah, but a hammer is muktzah because what's a hammer primarily used for? Building. Building is forbidden on Shabbos. So it's a same thing with the screwdrivers made for building, to screw in screws and that. But if you need it to tzerich gufay or mekayim, gufay means you want to use it something permissible, so then you would be allowed to. So according to halacha, we learned already, we learned to mention it a bunch of times, if you want to open a bag on Shabbos, okay? So you can't just open, if it's glued on top, you can't just open it. Because then you're tearing not in a destructive form. You're not ruining the bag. Okay? And a lot of times there's letters on the bag, and you can't cut letters on Shabbos. But if you take a scissors, then you can cut even, and then you can make sure not to cut the letters. And then you're destroying the bag. So that you would be allowed to do. So again, just to use a scissors on Shabbos is muktzah, but if you need the place where it's on, or you need to use something permissible with it, like crack open a coconut, or cut a bag, or cut a piece of string that's knotted, and then if you can't undo the knot, like we're learning here. If you can't undo the knot, so then you're allowed to use the scissors to cut the string. Cut what?
So if you get a gift on Shabbat, you can open it with the scissors?
Yeah. What do you mean if you get the gift on Shabbat?
Someone brings you a gift on Shabbos.
Yeah.
And you open the ribbon with the instruction.
You can cut the ribbon. You can make a ribbon cutting ceremony.
But can you accept a gift on Shabbat?
Yeah, now you didn't ask that question. You asked me, can I open it? You didn't ask me if you can. So the question is, okay, the question is, it's too complicated to answer in 3 minutes, but it depends, number one, if there's an Erev, even though you don't go buy it for sure, you'd eat it. If somebody brought you a gift on Shabbos, so normally the din is, if somebody does a malacha for you on Shabbos, you're not allowed to benefit from the malacha on Shabbos. If somebody cooked for you on Shabbos, you can't benefit. If somebody, your next door neighbor has a lemon tree, and on Shabbos he takes off some lemons and give it to you, you're not allowed to use it until after Shabbos. Even if he's a goy, you can't use it until after Shabbos, okay? But what happens if somebody brings you something on Shabbos? So poskim discuss, because carrying is different than any other malacha. Carrying is, you're not changing the object. Every malacha that you do on Shabbos, besides carrying, you're changing the object. Here you're just moving the object from one place to the next. You're not really doing anything. So there's a question, if somebody carries on Shabbos, if you're allowed to benefit from the malacha or not. So there's a whole discussion. Chayyadam wants to say yes. The Alter Rebbe says yes in Hilchos Pesach by a mitzvah. He says if somebody carried on Shabbos, you can use it, but that's tzorech mitzvah, so it's a different story. So I'm saying if you got a package on Shabbos, it depends. If it came outside the tchum, outside the Shabbos, 2,000 amas, then you can't use it on Shabbos. It's muktzah, because it came outside the tchum. If it was inside the tchum, Okay? A lot of time Amazon, all these things, you get a delivery Shabbos morning, Friday night it was already in the city already. Right? So then it's in the tchum. So it depends if it's muksa, not muksa. It's very complicated, it's not for now.